in the middle of my... Sorry if this is kind of slanted. Hello everyone, my name is Sabrina and welcome back to my channel. Today I am finally doing the Q&A that I said I was going to film a while ago. I did actually film it, but it turned into my bedroom tour, which if you haven't watched, you should do that. It turned into like a 40-minute long video and I was like, I'm not editing through this before I leave. So now I've left and I'm here in the UK and this is my moving to the UK Q&A. I thought about like asking for updated questions, so like if anybody has any other questions about now that I've moved, because all of these were before I moved, but then I honestly don't have any new answers for you, so there we go. Okay, so I have all your questions written in here. I asked you guys on Instagram, I often ask you guys questions on Instagram and do polls and stuff to send me, so I asked you guys to send me some of your questions that you might have about me moving. I've also been pretty much like vlogging on my Instagram and I saved them all in a highlight because I didn't want to actually vlog with my camera while I was moving because I thought it would be like just too stressful to always have a camera out. And I was super weepy and I knew I was going to be super weepy and I thought I would be like very anxious too, so it's just like that's just not going to happen. I'll just do Instagram stories. So that's what I did. The first question I had was what scared me the most. And honestly, like there are so many answers to that. I don't know what the like number one thing that scared me. I think, and again, now that I've been here, this might be a little bit different because now I'm here. But the thing that scared me the most before I left was my questionable mental health. I have had really bad travel anxiety in the past, and like in situations where like I almost didn't get on the plane or I almost booked a flight home the day that I got there because I was like, I can't be here. And even like when I didn't do that, it was just horrible for the time that I was there. It would just be like a really difficult experience and would really set me back in terms of my mental health. And so I was afraid that I would move here, which is something I always wanted to do, and then my mental health would get to a point where it's like, this is literally unsafe for you to be here, you can't take care of yourself, you're not functioning, you're not living, you're not doing anything. And I was really afraid that that was going to happen, and luckily it happened. But I thought it was a really high likelihood that that was going to happen. And now that I am here, I think part of my stress, part of my anxiety about being here is just that I'm going to regret being here. But I actually went and talked to a counselor yesterday because I made a counseling appointment because I wanted this to be successful. And even though it's expensive, it was £50 for like 50 minutes, which is cheaper than Canada, but still expensive. I thought, you know, I've probably poured like 3 or 4 grand into like getting the visa, getting an Airbnb, getting a flight, and all like the expenses to get me here. Like it wouldn't make sense for me not to spend the $50 a week or $50 twice a month to see a counselor to make it possible for me to stay here. Like it would be infinitely more expensive for me to just go home. So that's why I made the counseling appointment. And then I was totally fine when I got here. I had one night where I freaked out and then I've been fine since. So now I'm just afraid that like I'm gonna regret it and it's just not going to be a right fit, or I'm going to get to a point where I'm like, why am I doing this? But the counselor I talked to yesterday, even though I'm not going to see her again, was just like, you just need to remember that this is your decision to be here. Like you chose this and you can always choose not to be here. But if you just focus on the fact that this was your decision and why it was your decision and so on and so forth, it might help like with clarity and just make you feel a little more settled, which I have found is true. She was very insightful, that counselor. Another question was if I ever think I will go back to Canada. I expect I will because I don't think I'll be able to get a second visa after this. So I will end up back in Canada at some point, I think. But it's hard for me to say. When I first wanted to move here, I was like, you're moving out, you're never moving back home, this is it. Because I really would like to continue on my visa. Yeah, I don't think it'll be easy for me to get a visa beyond, I'm going to take my sweater off. I think it'll be easy for me to get a visa beyond what I have now, which is 2 years. I would need to have a job here that could sponsor me, and I'm not very ambitious with my career. Mostly because I'm not very, what's the word, confident that I will be able to acquire a job where they will be willing to sponsor me. Yeah, I've been thinking, you know, now that I've done this, I could get a working holiday visa to like France or Australia. I don't know if they do them in Ireland. And do something like that. Like I could do something like this again, just in another country. So I have no idea. The short answer is, I don't know. And then I got, the next question is, how did you come to this decision? And that's what everybody always asks, and it's the hardest for me to answer because there's no one thing that I'm like, this is why I wanted to go. I've wanted to move to the UK since I was like 15, since I was in like early high school. And back then, this might come as a surprise to people who actually know me, but I was like very obsessed with like Doctor Who and Sherlock, and I don't come off as that like nerdy, geeky kind of person, but I very much was and very much still am. And I at that time was like, I felt much more of a connection with the UK than I did in Canada, mostly because I was using all this stuff as like an escape from the trauma of high school. But yeah, I was just like, it was like my dream to move here one day, and I wanted to go right when I graduated high school, but I had to get a degree, and so I went to the local university. I was going to graduate in 3 years. I ended up doing 4 years because I loved my program so much. And then my plan was always to move here after that. Like, as long as I've been making life plans, it's always been move to the UK. And then after that, question mark. So yeah, that's how I came to the decision. I ended up coming to Edinburgh initially because I didn't want to move to London. Even though there's tons and tons of jobs in London, I probably could find a job there. I just thought it would be too much for me, too fast, like to move out of my family home in a quiet, secluded Canadian northern town to London. I was like, no. And also I can't afford that. So I thought Edinburgh would be like a nice mix of the two. And then my friend got into school here, so we're going together. So that kind of answers another question that I got, which was, why did you decide on Scotland? And to be totally honest with you, like, I never really thought Scotland over England or anywhere else. It was more like Edinburgh over London. But I'd never been here before. I never really knew that much about Scotland. Beyond that Karen Gillan is from here. Not here in Edinburgh, but yeah, I never really was like, oh, I need to go to Scotland. It was just somewhere in the UK. I really didn't plan this out very well. One of my friends asked me, have you looked for the nearest IKEA to your place yet? One half of this is that I don't have a place yet. This is an Airbnb. But the first thing that I did when we were like, okay, we're going to Edinburgh, was look up if they had IKEA here and where it was. Like, you know me so well. It was literally the first thing that I did. I didn't look at jobs or apartments or anything. I was like, IKEA. Another person asked me what my #1 packing rule is. I had a long answer to this when I filmed it while I was packing. My short answer is to pack and then repack and then repack and then repack, because every time you repack, you're able to fit a little more, and you're also able to be like, I don't actually want this, I don't actually need this, and you give yourself time to like kind of go through everything that's in your bag and see like the things you added just because in the moment you're like, oh, I'm gonna want to wear that, or I'm gonna want to have that with me, and then after a while you're like, no, it's fine without it, because you've been now living your life without wearing that or without having that thing in your everyday life, and you're like, oh, it's fine. And so yeah, that's my #1 thing. My last question is, what are you looking forward to doing most in Scotland? I haven't even gotten to like thinking about fun things that I could do here. I've just been focusing on like needing a job, needing an apartment, and like feeling settled. I'm trying not to get too stressed about the finance or financial aspect. Yeah, I haven't even thought about, like, I know I want to go to the Highlands, I know I want to go to Glencoe. I know those are things that I'm like, I would look forward to if I had booked them, but I don't want to book anything until I've got my life sorted out. One of my friends did ask me to talk about the mental health aspect of my travels. If you've been following on my Instagram, maybe you're interested in this. It wasn't really a question, it was just like, talk about this if you want to. And I think that's because I talked to her about it, because she moved overseas and she knows my psychotic tendencies. So I already touched on like why I was nervous about moving here in terms of my anxiety. And now that I'm here and I'm not anxious, it's going to be harder for me to talk about it because it was such a huge thing to me before I came. I was so convinced that I just, like, I probably thought 75% chance I'm going to end up going home within a week. Hasn't been a week yet, so it could still happen. I've always had anxiety my whole life. There's not a time I can remember not having had anxiety, not in the sense that it's been chronic for my whole life, but there have always been things that give me anxiety, or things like I remember being a kid and going home sick, and you are physically sick, but as soon as you're out of that stressful situation, you're not feeling sick anymore. I knew as a kid that I was sick, but it wasn't really the typical physical illness, and now as an adult I can acknowledge like that was a panic attack, that was anxiety, that, do you know what I mean? In like my childhood memories of why I was being weird about certain things, or why I got sick in a certain situation, usually from traveling. So I was very nervous about coming here because I know it's not something that I can make go away. And it's something that I've been having a really hard time with when it comes to traveling, when it comes to life transitions. For the past few years, it's gotten a little bit worse again, probably since I went to Dublin. And then when I got on the plane, I was just like totally chill. I cried when I said goodbye to my parents, and mostly actually when my friend's mom hugged me, I was like, I cracked. And we actually ended up having a flight canceled and having to stay overnight in Toronto. So like the typical things for me, like I couldn't sleep, I couldn't really eat because I was anxious, but I didn't ever be like, legitimately, I need to get on a flight back home, because I have had that, like I'm looking for flights, I'm talking to gate agents, I'm doing all this stuff. I never had that, and I think part of it is because I had booked this counseling appointment way in advance. I had talked to the counselor already, who's here in Edinburgh. I'd talked to my friends, and like they and my family knows at this point, I'm 22, like they've caught on. I'm not the only person in my family like this. And so I was very much aware that what might happen, and I basically planned for it. So I was like, made the counseling appointment. I made actually a handout for my roommate who was traveling with me, because I have had really, really bad traveling experience, and it makes it a really difficult experience for the person that I'm traveling with too, and I recognize that, and I know I can be a really hard person to be around when I'm having anxiety. So I just wanted to be like, you don't have to feel bad for me. This is what's going on if you see me like this. This is what's going on if I'm doing this. This is what you can do if you feel like you need to do something, but absolutely you don't like need to feel bad for me, because it's just gonna happen. It's not your fault, it's not my fault, it's not anybody's fault. It's just how it is. And it happened a little bit. I was anxious, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it has been. And I mean, it was stressful for her too, so we kind of were able to go through that together. So, I don't know, I've tried to be pretty open about the mental health aspect of this. I think it's probably difficult for people watching, because like, you guys don't know anything about my mental health history. You don't know what it manifests like for me, or what my triggers are, or anything like that. So it's a little bit confusing sometimes. You're only kind of getting half of the story, or the right now part of the story. But I just wanted to, because I know so many people who have been reaching out to me, because I'm going through this big life move, and there's so many people out there who have been so supportive and so just like invested in my story right now. And I know a lot of them have been like, oh, I always wanted to do this, but I never could. And for a lot of them, it's because of mental health problems. And so I wanted to be like, for me, it's always been worth it, because this has literally always been my plan. So I needed to make this happen. But for a lot of people, it's just kind of like, that would be a cool thing to do. And I want people to feel like you could do that. Sorry, that cut out. And I think now that it's getting more difficult to travel to new countries for a long time, to work there, to immigrate, to do whatever, it's something that, you know, if you want to do it, you should do it sooner rather than later. Anyways, that's my Q&A. It's also very long, so I'm gonna say goodbye now. Don't get too attached to this background because it's in my Airbnb and I leave hopefully in a week to a new apartment that I don't have yet. Anyways, sayonara. Make sure you watch my room tour if you haven't watched it yet, and maybe leave me a question in the comment section if you have a question. Maybe I'll do another Q&A. Hopefully I'll do an apartment tour next, if I get an apartment.